Anyone else have a birthday today? So the topic of this evening's Dharma talk was meant to be more clear than it's probably going to sound. Maybe Chizan misunderstood it and thought I was making a comment on his heritage. Is that right? It's don't Polish confusion. Don't Polish it. Is that what they say? I asked that knowing full well that they are, but I still went to the dictionary, just on the chance there's some other vowel in there I missed. So the idea with that is just a title that may or may not work. Probably is more than likely there's some better ones. But the idea there is when a confusion arises here with you, or when a confusion arises in your environment, and in particular when it arises in someone you're interacting with, or don't fix it, don't dress it up, don't polish it, don't correct. When someone is misunderstanding what you're saying and you can see that, leave it at that. Don't necessarily correct people based on your perception. I'm not saying at some point you might. You shouldn't do it unless you really have to. You should allow there to be some space there so that that person himself can possibly see that. If you're immediately, kind of gossiping with them about the whole thing, based on your wish or your desire that they understand every word you said. Copy? Yeah, I copy. What did I say? Paraphrase what I said. You know how that all goes, especially if those of you are in a relationship. Not that I have that experience. So I'm not saying that it isn't important to try to attempt to understand what someone is saying, what someone is trying to convey to you, but slow down a little bit. Allow the person. Confusion and awakening, or confusion and clarity, are not separate. They get their meanings from each other. You can't have confusion without clarity. You can't have clarity without confusion. The way in which they work together, using those conceptual pointers, needs to arise in your consciousness so that you understand it beyond the concepts that are being used. Don't cling to your tools just because you're a carpenter. Don't take your hammer to bed with you. Is that funny? Probably because the word hammer implies something else that I don't know about.
I just imagine a claw hammer on my pillow.
Oh, okay. There again, that image may or may not work. Forget it if it doesn't. But it's the idea. What inspires me to talk about that is you could actually, when someone is talking with you and you can see they're not exactly understanding what you're saying, you could wait a little bit, and maybe they might come back and say, "So I'm not sure if I'm understanding you there." They might have commented that shows to you that they're not really getting what you said. But you can wait a little bit. Trust their intelligence. You're not necessarily the smartest person in the room. And in the same way, your own confusion when you're doing sitting meditation, or if you're at work, or with your family, or with your coworkers out to the mall, or wherever you might be, and there's confusion, you can stop and just wait. Wait a little bit. Allow Trungpa Rinpoche one of the first teachings I heard from him is give a little bit of space. And I thought, what does that mean? Just exactly that. It means space. It means you don't have to fill up everything with your commentary. Jason.
When you're communicating with somebody and there's clearly a misunderstanding in what you may have meant by what you say, and our impulse to immediately clarify because of our own discomfort, does that discomfort become any more comfortable as we practice not immediately correcting or polishing that misunderstanding?
Good question. It could become more difficult because there's kind of a nagging feeling that you want to, you know, that they're not getting it, they're not coming back and, like Sokuzan said, correcting themselves or something. They're not elaborating on it. You could actually just let it go. But it's very interesting to look at our own motivation. Our motivation behind that isn't so much to really necessarily help that person. It's that it's about us. We don't want to be misunderstood. So it's a very subtle form of narcissism, self-centeredness. Everything, according to the Yogacara teachings and the seventh consciousness, which is the paranoid mind, the ego mind, the klesha mind, that everything tends to be about us in some way, about how we're doing, are we being understood, do they like us?
I'm wondering if the opposite is true. I often feel that it's my ego or self-centeredness that doesn't want to be confused. I want people to explain things until I understand them. Is that true for the opposite when I'm confused and I want more?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, very good question. Thank you. Very good question, because when it happens to you, it's the same thing. Hang out with your confusion. Rather than try to get rid of it, cover it up, solve the problem. That's very good. Have a willingness, if you have difficulty practicing that, you could include the other 5 sense consciousnesses, other than the mind that is kind of freaking out because something's not understood or you don't understand something. Understanding in a relative sense can show up lots of different ways. Just understanding that you're not clear is a kind of clarity. Maybe the best one, maybe the one that you perhaps need to actually be with for a while so you can see how that opens up. That could be, as we say, a dharma gate for you. So the rush to fill up the space of confusion or readjust everything so we're no longer confused. That would be very similar. Jinshu.
Why is a relative understanding between two people less important than the space that's happening in?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's less important. It's just that it's just part of the whole thing that we tend to flood with our anxiety or with our distress or with our commentary that they're not understanding me. I need to explain this more, or that I'm confused. I don't understand what they're saying. So you could actually, when someone says something you're not really sure about what they're saying, you could wait a little bit and just listen. You could allow their words to go back and forth, maybe in your consciousness. You could look at their body language. Sometimes there's more being communicated by someone's, when I say language, I don't mean it's in terms of things to analyze. It's just how a person appears. More.
When that impulse comes up, or when that it feels like understanding is necessary or important. What are we missing by looking for understanding?
We're turning away from the confusion, and we're trying to shut down on the very thing that we're not clear about. And the idea there is to stay with that for a while till you begin to see some of that clarity. There's another word for this. You know what it is? Patience. We're so impatient with our mind. We're so impatient with so many things. We want results. We want to clear it up now. Rather than it's like wanting the weather to change now. So a very similar kind of, our state of mind can be seen in the same way.
If you are having a discussion with somebody,
Yes.
and if it happens to be somebody that's close to you, family member or whatever, and you are trying to, get them to understand what you're saying,
Yes.
is that feeling that you feel of wanting them to understand, is that something that comes out of ego all
Yes.
the time, or is it necessarily, could it come out of compassion because they're taking it the wrong way and they're getting
Fishy.
their feelings hurt?
That's very fishy.
Okay.
Yeah. It's ego. It's self-centeredness. Compassion doesn't have a compassionator. There's nobody behind it. If it's actual compassion, you won't even know you're being compassionate. You can't get a little tiny merit badge for that. In other words, you won't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm doing so well, I'm being compassionate. Actual compassion may be closer to compassion to just sit there and be confused, not try to be better than you already are, to be someone else who is no longer confused. Compassion starts right here. If it's not working this way, it's not going to work that way. I'm not saying you can't be kind to people, but that's not exactly compassion. I would call that, let's see, being kind to people. Something you actually do. That's something you can do. And if people don't understand the quality of compassion, karuna, the Western word is agape. So it's not really something you do. It's something you are. And if you are that, you can't see yourself. Wherever you are, if you're seeing yourself, then that's a projection. You can't actually see who you are. And so you would just sit, and it's not that you wouldn't at some point start going the other direction, but you could wait a little bit. If you're talking to someone, you look into their eyes, not trying to make them nervous or one up them, like I'm so present and you're full of it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying just be there. You could actually be a little bit helpless, or if they say, "Are you all right?" Say, "Yeah, I'm okay," but not go into some kind of I got it, I don't have it, and so on. Just your presence. This is not a compliment, but your presence. I could say this to anyone. Your presence is much more important than who is being present. There is no who. There's just presence. It doesn't belong to anyone. But if you're in a situation where you're starting to panic about what someone thinks about you, or what you think about your understanding, or what they think about your lack of understanding, what they're trying to understand, and all that rigmarole that goes on, you see it everywhere. And on the news, they will not let go of it. It's just a constant torture rack. And so, but you could just sit there. You could hold your seat. You could be not particularly trying to get trippy about it, or all romantic, but you could feel the air in the room. You could look at the colors that are on the floor, on the wall. You could look at the color of the person's eyes. You could look at might be someone you're with all the time, but you could actually register their presence, their physical presence, and that's how you have access to their spiritual presence.
Kind of piggybacking off of what Sarah asked, leads me to a question. Can compassion be taught, or can kindness be taught? Either one?
I think it's mainly taught by example. especially with little people, and show them how to do that. So I think it can to some extent. But compassion, I think it's something you have to discover by working with your own difficulty, negativity. If there's any warfare going on here, you've got to find that one first. You have to unload all those weapons that are hidden down here out of sight, just in case you run into trouble. You can pop somebody. Shoto.
Is confusion present?
Is confusion present? What do you think? Well, confusion is a concept, and presence is a concept that are pointing at something that is impossible to describe. You could say about confusion, you could say, well, it's spinning. Well, it's like a chasing your tail, or it's not knowing which way to go. So there's that kind of thing. Yes?
When you say compassion doesn't have a compassionator,
Yes.
is that true for any? I don't know if her speech compassion is.
You're the English major, or majorette.
Does confusion have a confusionator?
I knew I was going to get stuck in my own bog eventually. You could say that. You could say there's some kind of identity doing things. But awakening or enlightenment, there's no one that happens to. It's the disappearance of the separation. So there's no one to claim it. You won't, if you awaken to this to ultimate reality, you won't know it. You may notice that the confusion is not what it was before. You'll notice you're no longer interested in getting rid of anything. Sheldon.
How can you tell the difference between ignoring your confusion and giving it space?
I think it shows up differently for each person, but I think that you're more likely to have a personal understanding of what that question points to. It points to for everybody. You do a lot of sitting. Sitting isn't going to do anything other than get you to practice holding still and watching. It isn't going to lead to anything. You're not particularly going to start to levitate, although I've had people say they're levitating and leaving their bodies and turning into chickens and stuff. Oh, probably shouldn't be sharing that. So I would say, addressing you personally, if I may, since it's your birthday, I would say that in your situation, it's probably going to be a lot more sitting meditation than you're doing. I haven't checked in with you lately to see how much that is, but I would think that's probably the area that needs to be stronger. And when I say it needs to be stronger, I'm saying when you do that, you're going to feel weaker. That's what it feels like to actually stretch and train the awareness. It feels like kind of like failure on some level. Good question. Further questions?
Does confusion lead to hopelessness?
Confusion lead to hopelessness? If you're lucky. Keep coming.
How does that present itself?
Okay, so when I say if you're lucky, I'm just saying that probably anyone who, I'm not saying you can't meditate a little bit and smooth things out and be basically doing a little bit better, but actually transcend to turn this into a spiritual path, it seems to be necessary to go very, very deep. And part of going very, very deep means you're probably going to be looking at the confusion and not polishing it or polishing it. You're not going to scrub it down. You're not going to clean it up. You're not going to fix anything. You see the difficulty. And the longer you look at it, the more you're tempted to fix something or correct it or adjust it or reshape it or something. But the awareness practice is basically saying to you, just look, just look. And what this leads to is a kind of exhaustion, you could call it hopelessness. And when I say if you're lucky, the reason I'm saying that, since the question came up, I can address it. I probably wouldn't give a talk on hopelessness. Have I given a talk on hopelessness? Maybe I should. Because it's as the Trungpa Rinpoche said, the path to liberation, the path to realization is one disappointment after another, till the final disappointment, the final hopelessness, which is ego is not going to witness its own enlightenment. It can't, because the very nature of ego is separation and self-centeredness, albeit somebody who's really nice, really helps everybody, puts everybody before themselves, but there's an interior kind of identity there that wants credit for that. We all notice, if you do something to help somebody, how you kind of want them to know. You can go, oh, I don't do that. And then we'll talk. Because I do it. That's how I know about it. I do it too. That's how I know about that. I want to be acknowledged. And the only way to deal with that is not to try to stop it, it's to go through it, to actually be that person that wants to be acknowledged. Be that person that's hopeless. Be that person who's confused. That's why I say don't polish the confusion. The dharma gate, or the way to liberation is through, the craziness, through that. I'm not saying deliberately go crazy or something. I'm just saying when the negativity arises, see that as an opening for you to deepen your understanding and your awareness. Because if you can make friends with this person, speaking of you won't have any enemies. Because here's the enemy. Here's the problem. Here's the issue: the self-centered that wants things to be different than they are. Second noble truth of the Buddha. And if you can just see that deeply and see, as you go into that, you'll see there's no one that feels that way. The emotion doesn't go away. It's just that you have a realization that there isn't anybody that's having that feeling. Quite disappointing. So when I say hopeless, I'm not saying you need to never use that word again. You could use it when you use the word. You could just kind of understand how you're. We're almost out of gas. I can hopefully make it to the station. There's nothing wrong with that particularly, but kind of a hopeful situation goes towards what in Buddhism was called the God realm, or polishing everything and fixing everything up. And you can get some duration of it. Some people who are very, very wealthy, very beautiful, very gifted, have a lot of great intelligence, have wonderful children, and get lots of awards and sail through life, so to speak. We all know probably half a dozen of those. The other 750 billion are having different kinds of problems. Or is it 800 billion? 900 billion? Well, we know what people are doing if that's the case. Discounting. Yes.
You said the term or phrase deepen your spiritual path, and I was wondering if what that means to be deep on your spiritual path, and if you recognize it when you are. Probably
not. It can be taught that way, but the understanding is so subjective. So you just it's kind of feels like you just keep repeating something without any payoff. Is that how it feels?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, you got another week to go, don't you? Imagine how I feel.
Come home with me.
Shoto.
Are we able to deepen, to do the deepening of our practice
Sure. And the way we do that, which is, I'm assuming you'd like me to comment on it, is to see how shallow it is. It always works in contrast and polarity. So just see how you're just here in the room and you're looking at the wall and ho hum. You know, nothing magical is happening. You don't feel like you're melting into the universe. Your knee hurts, your back hurts, your mind hurts, and it sucks. And it's another hour and a half before the dawn strikes the bell. And what do I say? Stay there anyway. At some point, or points, or maybe it's not even a point, at some point the boundary between post-meditation, your everyday life, and the meditation practice, that boundary dissolves, and you're always present. And there's no credential in it. It's not like someone, it isn't some kind of feeling you have where you're always present. You might notice that you're never somewhere else.
Can you be daydreaming and present?
Yes, you can.
How are you
How?
not somewhere else if you're daydreaming?
Because there isn't anywhere else. There's nothing else, there isn't anywhere else, but you have to realize that, because if you don't, you're gonna think you're missing something. You're gonna think. I was just noticing her gasho when she came in. Very nice, deep gasho. So the contrast, we start to see the contrast there, and then the same thing with post-meditation, meditation. We notice that they're not the same, but the boundary disappears. You know how it feels to sit here, how much difference there is between sitting here all day long and going out working in the garden, or going to the farm, or doing something else. Like sitting here all day and working on windows are probably very similar.
Yeah, I don't like either.
So the boundary's starting to fade. Cosmic joke. Further questions? Shoto, do you have another one? Yes.
What does unpolished confusion look like?
It's just rough and ragged, and it doesn't seem to go away. It doesn't. It's just kind of, it's just irritating, or makes one feel dizzy. And without a spiritual path, you'll do something with that. You may not polish it, you may not try to clear it up or fix it, but you might want to cover it up. Drugs tend to cover that up temporarily. You know, maybe you have some activity, could be totally simple thing that you do, but you have to do a lot of it in order to keep away from that particular confusion. It might be golf. Nothing wrong with golf. Nothing wrong with any kind of sport, or you know, any kind of activity, fishing, or you know, some kind of activity. You find that if you go do that, you kind of feel better. And yes.
What would be the identifying marks of confusion?
Identifying marks?
Yeah, how would you know if you're confused?
Don't you know that you're confused?
Am I confused?
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
There you have it. If it wasn't disappointing, then it wouldn't be exactly confusion.
What would it be?
Not disappointing.
Would it be ego feeling enamored with itself?
It could be. And spend a lot of time spinning around by grasping at some kind of success feeling.
So sometimes during book study, I feel confused.
Yeah, me too.
But then there are other times that I feel like, oh, I get this. Is that the same thing?
It sure is. So, what's the next question? I'm not going to tell you if you can't ask it.
No difference?
Really? They seem different. Jushu knows. Sandokai. Isn't that the name of your room? Yeah. Equality of sameness and difference. It's what is things that are different and the things that are the same are equal. Have an equality to them.
So is it just in the conceptual naming of things that the difference arises?
It seems that the conceptual naming of things is a way we're trying to skirt the issue. We're trying to get out of the situation. Not always. Sometimes.
What makes us feel like we have to get rid of confusion when we don't feel that way about clarity?
I just think that there's different ways of talking about it, and there's different ways of experiencing both of those, clarity and confusion. I think it's the confusion is more threatening to the self-centeredness, and the self-centeredness likes clarity. It likes to be, I'm the one, it might be unspoken, but I'm the one who's clear. The issue or the problem with that kind of clarity is it's relative. It's a high level of relative truth. To be very clear about things. To be very clear about your confusion is clarity. To be very confused about your clarity is what? Yeah. Yeah. Buddhas are very clear about confusion. Sentient beings are very confused about clarity. Buddhas meaning the awakened ones. All 15 of them.
How does clarity about confusion look?
If you see it all the way, if you see all of it, if you see it in its totality, then it looks not separate. You can't find anything that is separate from you anywhere. You can't find an enemy. You can't find a friend. You can't find anything. You can't find anything else. There isn't anything else.
So is confusion about clarity thinking that things are separate?
What?
Being confused about clarity, is that positing some sort of separation?
Yes. Lauren?
If you find clarity, I don't know if you find it, but is confusion there? Is confusion always with clarity?
Yes. Shut up.
How can we recognize confusion if we don't know what sanity is?
You don't know what sanity is? I can tell you a couple of words. No more warfare. No more fighting against anything.
If we don't see that, how can we know what confusion is?
You just keep looking at the warfare. Don't correct the warfare. Don't correct the confusion. Just look at it. Because if you do anything with it, it starts to spin and it draws you and yourself, your self-centeredness right into the tilt-a-whirl or the merry-go-round. It rotates and rotates. You come into the light and you go back into the darkness. Come into the light, go back. Relative truth. Questions, especially from someone who hasn't had a question yet?
Is it ever appropriate to polish our own confusion to make it easier on other people?
What I would say is what I think you're intending there is just to work with your own confusion in a way that you don't project it onto others. So I don't know if that's exactly polishing it. I think it might be more like a willingness to feel. You can't really refrain from projecting if you're trying to shut down on the feeling, because that just almost automatically turns into finger pointing. Either you yourself or to someone else. They did it, they're to blame, or I'm terrible, I'm to blame. I'm probably never going to get over this. I'm just a terrible person. And so if you just the conventional way of saying is the ability to respond. It's called responsibility. It doesn't mean blame. It just means that you can actually, whatever is occurring, you respond to it in a complete, open, and direct way. If you do that, then you see. You might not use this word, but you see you're not separate from it. It doesn't mean you're to blame for it. It doesn't mean that you get credit for the clarity or get the blame for the confusion. And so you could. That might be happening on some kind of level. The way you asked the question, I would say that you're probably not polishing anything. If you're doing that, you're probably just being responsible for your negative emotions rather than putting them out on somebody. If you really do that, it's not that hard to just, it's not fake or phony to be kind to someone that you're with, or even though you're having a tremendous amount of negativity happen, plenty of room for that. You're not, if you really are putting others before yourself, which on this path you should be in some way, and that happens in different ways and different levels. Yeah. And so if you're actually endeavoring to do that, then it's not like you're setting your negativity aside. You're including your negativity, but you're also including your technical term in Sanskrit is bodhicitta, or the mind of awakening. You're actually living that. You're living in that, so that when you interact with others, they may or may not perceive some negativity there. Depends on how present they are. If you're actually doing that in such a way that you're supportive of someone else and their whatever they're going through, their difficulty. It depends on how close you are to that other person. If it's just a casual, something that's fairly casual, it won't be noticed. But if it's someone that's very close, if it was somebody like in this temple residence in the Sangha, probably going to show up more. You're just putting the other person, their welfare, their well-being, their happiness. May all beings, one of the practices, and I think it's the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, and I don't have it memorized by any means. But is all difficulty and failure to me, all praise and success and happiness to others. That doesn't work if you're in therapy. In therapy, they assume there's an ego that needs to be lifted up and supported. It's called self-esteem. And I'm not here to correct anybody. We've got people in here who work with that situation all the time. Most people are not ready to do this kind of practice. So therefore, we need to meet them where they're at and help them where they're at. And they might need to work with their self-esteem. They might need some kind of support so that they're not going to turn everybody into a meditator. It's very hard to do this practice, as those of you who have been doing it know. But if you want to do this, then it's available. further?
We're talking about dealing with our own negativity, but there being space to be kind to other people.
Yes.
When our own negativity feels consuming, where does that space come from?
It's magic. It really is. It's ordinary magic. If you're really putting others first, it just starts to show up. It's an open dimension. There is no consciousness doesn't belong to anyone. When you realize this, you realize that your own self-centeredness, your ego, or that little dot of me, it might be flipping around in there somewhere, but your mind is everywhere. The fancy word for that is Mahavipassana, or the great panoramic awareness. And you're not separate from that. You're not separate from it right now. Ego, when that starts to open up, starts to panic. It gets agoraphobia. Fear of open spaces. Too much space. Like you're when walking down a hallway and you walk into an auditorium or a big hall, and everyone in there turns around and looks at you. And if you know who you are, you won't mind that a bit. If you don't know who this is, and you're worried about who this is, and you're worried about your value, you're probably going to be affected a little bit. Even if you're a public speaker who's practiced this, you're probably going to have a little bit of. Whereas if you know who you are, then you know who everyone else is. They're also not separate. So then probably what will arise is humor, because you can feel the projections. It's like, when somebody's looking at you, judging you, it's like you can feel the eye marks hitting you. You know about that, right? Half the people probably are judging you because of their own confusion, their own disturbance about not being able to deal with their own self-criticism. So they want you to have some of it, yes.
When that negativity is consuming, is there a way to see or create more spaciousness there to be kind to others?
I think just the way you're asking the question tells me you already understand what I'm saying. It's a matter of repetition. Just continue to return to it. Return to the wall. You're a young woman. Return to the wall. Train your mind as much as you can. Find as much time as you can to sit down and do absolutely nothing, relatively nothing, but just watch what continues to move. It generally can be your diaphragm. It can be your breath coming and going. It can be the birds making noises. It can be someone walking down the hallway. It can be someone in here coughing. But it's also watching your own mind. I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, it shouldn't be happening, I don't know what I'm going to do when this happens. It's the chatter that goes on, and just observe that without shutting it down, polishing the confusion, without fluffing it up, justifying it, which is a sophisticated form of trying to elaborate and interpret it and kind of fix it up and dress it up so it doesn't look too bad. Lipstick on empty space. You don't wear lipstick, do you? So you got a leg up. Yes.
A question from Kevin Townley in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes, Kevin Townley. Boy, that's a long one. I can hardly hear you, Kevin. It's a long ways away.
I'll speak up.
Is that what he said?
No, I couldn't imagine what he would say.
He would probably try to explain to me how that doesn't make any difference because we're using modern technology, and
he's very clever.
He's extremely clever. He should come here sometime so we can give him a hard time.
He asks, is intervening when we perceive harm being done the same as going to war?
So, just as a flat question, less is better. Well, probably shouldn't intervene. On the other hand, if you're there and you're present, then you're not operating out of hope and fear, or at least a low level of it. Then you may function to go in step. The confusion started 1,000 years ago, and it just shows up all over the place. So it isn't like you're perpetuating aggression by going in and disarming somebody. If you're in that situation, that you're there, that's happening, this is happening, someone is hurting someone else, which is, I presume, what Kevin is referring to. And you're there, and you have hands, and you have a voice. Trust yourself. Help. I mean, that's like when if you look at that video, which I'm sure the 4-year anniversary of Eric Garner being taken down, it's heartbreaking to watch that. It's difficult to watch that black man 4 years ago being taken down by police and somebody actually sitting on his neck, so he suffocated. I think he said, "I can't breathe," 12 times before he died. And they haven't done anything to the officer. So if you saw that happening, you might have to do. I mean, if you were there, you might have to do something about it rather than say, "I'm just lecture yourself. I'm just a bystander. I'm going to stay out. I don't want to mess with the police." That was. Has everyone seen that video? It's been on quite a bit lately. Eric Garner is. He was there. He was trying to break up an argument between two other people, and that's how he got the attention came to him. He was trying to help somebody. They killed him. Yes.
Sato has a question from Bellevue. Actually, it's two parts. If I've been confused about what to do and haven't acted, where does the confusion go when I suddenly know what to do? Is it actually gone?
No, it's not. The confusion, you don't have to get rid of anything. The confusion, if you're clear, you're clear about confusion. So the confusion can still be confusing, but you're clear about it. So therefore, the clarity is going in all directions. And you're including everything. I often say, don't include. Don't conclude anything. The minute you say second, hour, day, year, lifetime, you say, I should, or I shouldn't. You might as well just put a hood over covered up your eyes. You need to function out of the awareness, and that way there won't be a should or a shouldn't there at all. That's difficult for us as self-centered ego mind. The conventional way of functioning is to say, well, should you do that or shouldn't you? And then evaluate it and think, what's the downside, what's the upside? All in terms of some kind of relative construct we call us and our life and so on. David?
What is courage and confusion?
So the word courage, bravery, I'd say just a willingness to be with whatever happens. It's there's a little kind of invented mantra. I don't know who made it up. Somebody recently. That I know Shoko's done quite a few of these. Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. And it's a way of just kind of going through, and even though you have all kinds of complaints and you're upset and things are not going well, and you're going to turn that around and go the other direction. You're going to put others before yourself, or you put yourself. So I think it's just a willingness to go through into the confusion, not aggressively, not charging in, but just a willingness to go into that situation. Yes.
So is the including part of that, or is that courage including? So
it could be. I mean, it's hard to. It's this. So that quality, I think, is showing up there. It's more of a feeling from the point of view of self-centeredness or ego. It kind of starves ego, because ego wants results. And if you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, you understand, but you're still functioning, you're functioning out of your understanding, which is not thoughts. Understanding might manifest in thoughts or concepts at some point, but probably not right at that moment. Won't necessarily be thinking.
So without the concluding, is this just continuous openness?
I don't think so. Continuous opening sounds a little bit like a project. If you're going to do that, then you might as well just do the mantra, continuously open, continuously open. Something about that is too much trying to be somebody else. It's more about seeing how you're not open. I actually have to see the negativity of the situation. The Buddha didn't awaken to fairy tales and the cow jumped over the moon. The Buddha awoke to intense suffering and difficulty, not only in himself, but everywhere he looked. He saw it, and that was his awakening. He went deeply down into that and had some kind of a breakthrough, sounds like, apparently, where he saw that all the separated sickness, aging, and death that he saw, separated situations that was so terrifying to him. Suddenly he saw that he was not separate from any of that, and any of that, none of that is separate from anything else. And so he transcended, his consciousness transcended the separation. And when it did that, there's nothing to include because it isn't separate, but you could say that it just stopped excluding everything. So he's not here, we can't talk to him, but the way these teachings come down, without someone who really saw this whole situation deeply, we wouldn't be able to work with this material the way we do.
So is it, I know we're not putting into words exactly, but is it more like a pie in the eye?
Like a pie in the eye?
Like a big pile.
Pie in the eye.
When you keep including.
Oh, no, it's not like a pile.
No.
No, it's just wherever you look, that's it. It's not a bunch of stuff. You're looking here, if you see what is real, and you look here, there isn't anything you're not seeing. You're seeing the Pleiades. You're seeing the center of the earth. Of course, not physically, not with physical eyes, but we're talking about spiritual eye or consciousness. More? Crickets? Oh, that's probably tinnitus. That's what I'm listening to. I just realized I haven't had any of that in a while. Is that the celery juice? Further questions? It's got time for one more. Yes, sir.
So the warfare and the confusion is always there, right?
Well, it ebbs and flows, but the important thing from the point of view of awareness practice or of this path is to don't do anything with it, but just be aware of it. And so it may get larger, it may get smaller. Draw no credential from it. When it starts to get smaller, don't add on to that, which is passion, one of the three poisons, that maybe I'm doing better, it's starting to go away. And when it gets larger, don't add on to that, I'm doing worse, it's getting bigger, I must be doing something wrong. All of that causes a circularity to happen. The word for that in Sanskrit word is samsara, or the wheel of life and death. And that's happening on all the relative planes. It's up and down. It actually ignores the very lack of separation, because it picks and chooses. I like it when it's not so confused, and I hate it when it's really confused.
So does that mean that even the enlightened ones still have that?
Yes.
Going on?
They could have, they may or they may not. It won't matter, and they won't care, because they're not ignoring anything anymore. So confusion comes up to Maitreya, or even the historical, but if some comes up, there's no problem there. It's just energy coming and going. More? And you can't make this happen because it's already the case. You have to, as I sometimes say, your grandfather did, your grandmother did. When you realize that, you realize you've always known this. But don't give up. Don't stop, don't quit, keep going, sit a lot, train your mind, find out who you are, blah, blah, blah. You know what to do. This is the monastery. Yes,
Does our endeavoring to put others before ourselves fall short of actually putting others before ourselves?
with you it would. No, not necessarily. No, I mean, it varies, you know, sometimes I would say don't do too much evaluating there, just give in. Just as has been said, just give an inch. When you see that you're starting to tighten down in your territory, give in a little bit. Allow someone else to be right, allow someone else to have their way or have things their way. Just a little bit of a movement there. Won't solve it in a relative context, but if you're also training your mind at the same time, then that relativity, that relative kind of thing, like in Tonglen practice, sending and receiving and sending while following a breath, or Maitri Bhavana, the practice we do where we put everybody before ourselves in a, you know, kind of a ritualized chant or song. Thank you very much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. I'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes we have in the hallway. Also, we receive, in addition to cash, checks can be mailed to the monastery at 33 Anderson Court, Battle Creek, Michigan 49017. We also accept credit and debit cards and PayPal. Please help us.
Nice.
May the merit this penetrate to all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Chi Shi Bu Shi Son Bu Sa Mu Bu Sa Bu Ko Bu Ja Bu Ri. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with love.